Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the SEC and the Big Ten and the possibility that they might have jumped ship if the college football playoff discussion was not met with what they wanted. But let's jump into to Reggie Bush and talk about his Heisman and getting it back for himself. I think this is something that we've been waiting on for quite some time. The NCAA has actually done something smart and something popular for the first time in what feels like quite some time. And I think this is an absolute no-brainer to me. I think all of the rules that were broken by Reggie Bush, or he still holds that he did not break rules, but we'll get to that a little bit later, are pretty much regular practice at this point. Now, some of the nuances of it are a little bit different, but at the end of the day, it's kind of ridiculous that it took this long, especially after NIL was introduced. And I think finally having him back in those Heisman ceremonies in possibly the Nissan Heisman House, I think will be a very good thing for college football and a very good thing for fans. Having him around the sport is always a good thing. Whenever you can have one of the guys that is one of the biggest icons in the history of the sport. I mean, you can't tell the story of college football without talking about Reggie Bush and those USC teams. I think it's an absolute no-brainer. Getting that guy back in the fold is a huge thing. So if you're kind of wondering, first of all, why it was taken in the first place, what the actual, allegations were against him, there were allegations that his parents were living in a rent-free house. There were allegations that he was getting illegal cash and benefits from agents. So obviously not necessarily standard practice in 2004. Definitely something that got him into quite a bit of trouble, and it also got SEC or USC. I don't know why I keep saying SEC, USC in quite a bit of trouble. They said they were hit with a lack of institutional control citation. OJ Mayo, the old USC basketball player that played in the NBA for quite some time, was also involved in this, and they had to vacate the final two wins of the national championship season in 2024 and all of its wins in 2025. Tons of scholarship reductions, two-year postseason ban. So the works for USC, really. 2004 was stripped of their national title by the FWA and the BCS, but the AP poll still recognizes USC, as do I. I still think they are the national title winner of 2004. But in 2005, it was all Reggie Bush. It was one of the more remarkable years individually that anyone really has ever had, especially at the running back position. Finished with over 2,000 yards from scrimmage, 18 touchdowns, was a huge part of that USC team that was trying to go back-to-back, win up against, the Vince Young Texas team in 2005, possibly, in my opinion, the greatest college football game of all time. Maybe the best football game of all time, frankly. But he had 554 rushing yards in the last two games of that season before the Heisman ceremony. And then there was some scrutiny after the championship game where Vince Young did just insane stuff for about 2 hours and won the title for Texas. So I think there's been this conversation for quite some time, right? People have been pushing for this pretty much since it was taken, to be totally honest with you. But the real aggressive push started when NIL was introduced, obviously. I think that's something that really put it on full display that all of these rules, all of these people that have been kind of villainized by college football and the NCAA throughout the years might have had a leg to stand on. And one of the people that kind of came forward was Johnny Manziel, who had a lot of the similar kind of ideas around him, right? You had this idea that he was taking advantage of the system and doing something he shouldn't have been doing, and I guess that's an argument, but they come to the conclusion that all of those things that were done probably should have been okay. So I think it's one of those things that had been kind of brewing on under the surface for quite some time, but when NIL was introduced, there was this massive, massive push. So I think it was kind of a matter of time. Also, Reggie Bush, threatened a defamation lawsuit against the NCAA, and I think that added a ton of pressure, to be totally honest with you. I think if you're asking me which one mattered more, Johnny Manziel or the defamation lawsuit, I'd lean towards the defamation lawsuit. But at the end of the day, I think, having former players, Matt Leinart came out, obviously, his former teammate, and Tim Brown, another Notre Dame player who won the Heisman. So two guys that, are big-time parts of this game have come out in the past to kind of support him in getting his Heisman back, but it just never quite happened. And finally, they have come to their senses and they have given it back. I think it's something that has been a very, very divided topic, I feel like, in college football for quite some time. I think there's tons of people that say, those were the rules at that time. He broke those rules, and that's kind of the game you play. I think there's people that say, they've admitted that those rules are different and you should be able to benefit from your name, image, and likeness. And if Reggie was able to do that at the time, I think a lot of the things that he got in trouble for would not have been an issue by any means, because the amount of money he would have brought in would have been off the charts. But I think it's one of those things that there's been pushed from, a number of different directions on this, but the vast, vast majority of college football people, especially the players, were behind Reggie Bush in getting this back. And I think it's something that it makes it a layup, right? There's so much, fan support for Reggie Bush getting it back. There's so many players that are so into it. Having him at the Heisman ceremonies is going to be a fantastic thing for all of these players that, get to watch Reggie Bush, get to see one of the players that is one of the biggest players in college football history standing up there with them as they take the Heisman Trophy is a huge thing. And I think any time that a sport can keep as many of their big-time players, especially from the past, intact in the sport, I think it's the most important thing for pretty much any sport, but especially college football, where you have so many incredible faces who maybe didn't have the greatest success in the NFL, although Reggie Bush isn't necessarily one of those cases. But there's tons of guys that, get to live forever as a Heisman winner and in those Heisman ceremony moments. So I think it's huge for him. I think it's huge for the NCAA. I think it's huge for college football, and especially those players that get to experience it, because he's someone that was out of the sport for just way too long. There was quite some time where he was not allowed to go to USC games even because of all the allegations that happened and everything that went down in 2010 when all of this kind of came to a head. But now that he has been back in the sport a little bit, he's been at USC, he's been on Fox with those broadcasts and been quite the Energizer Bunny for that staff. I think it's really a cool thing whenever you can bring him back into the fold, and it was one of those things that was just kind of festering under the surface for quite some time, and finally very, very glad that it's something that was pushed forward. I think it's an effortless decision, but it took them a while to get there. So I definitely think it's great to have him kind of back in the fold, have him possibly in those Heisman House commercials, because I think that would be a lot of fun for all the fans, not only USC fans, but people that, grew up watching him, people that got to see his greatness. If you want to check out his highlight tape from USC, it is out of this world. But I think it's a great thing for college football. But I do want to touch on something regarding this that I think could be pretty important. We talked yesterday about the NIL back pay case that Jeffrey Kessler is overseeing, and there's a ton of stuff going on with that, and there's a ton of different arguments being thrown around for why former athletes are entitled to a certain amount of money or are entitled to, I think the number that they threw out there was $1 billion in the totality of the back pay, but I think this is a great argument for the people arguing for NIL back pay, right? There's this idea that, the NCAA pretty much has openly admitted that the rules that they, had in place for quite some time were not necessarily the right way to go about business, and that you can rewrite some of the past that you have created because of the new rules that are in place. So Jeffrey Kessler, for everyone on that legal team, I think this is incredible. This is something that you can literally point to and say, well, you gave his trophy back. You admitted that what he did would have been fine in today's day and age, and he would have made, insane amounts of money during his time. How does that not apply to the rest of the college athletes that we're talking about in this case? So I think this is something that obviously is great for the sport, and the NIL back pay is something that is a little bit interesting to me for the most part, but I do think is something that it's going to be hard to beat. I think everyone in the college football world, whether you're a president or an athletic director or a coach, I think you understand that there is some type of payment coming, but I think this just gives them another leg to stand on. If you are Jeffrey Kessler in that in that lawyer team, I think it'll be really interesting to see if this is brought up, because I definitely would bring it up if I was them. I think this very much approves their belief that the NCAA had a couple of rules in place that were not the best rules in the world, and now they've admitted that maybe we should be able to rewrite the past. So maybe that comes with a big time check for some of these players, but we'll see how that develops. Obviously, great to have Reggie Bush back in the fray here with college football, because it was a long time where he was not, where he was off in the NFL and wasn't even allowed to go to USC games. Now he's back fully in the fray. Now he has this trophy back, and definitely deserves it. So very, very excited for him. Very excited for college football. I think having someone like that as a big time face in your sport can only really be good for you. So we'll definitely continue talking about the NIL case, of course, and how this kind of might affect that. But for the time being, we'll take our second break here. And when we come back, I'm going to do my first round mock draft. This is not an easy thing to do, so definitely spare me a little bit. But I did my best. So I'll break down that right after this. So stick with us.